silly things like that. Jeep Hampshire, that's him, concerned about his tires. He and I first met at Green Valley in Texas. He came down there with the Chet Herbert Dual F85 car, Hampshire and Steen it was called. And he ran really good, and I got to talking to him. And then when I moved to California, for some reason he recognized me, and we chatted it up, and his wife was there, and we got to be fast friends. When I ended up getting married many years later, he was the best man, and I think we showed a picture of that goings on. And Jeep was a good driver, drove a lot of cars, drove for Stellings, he drove for Caspary and Stokey, he drove the Hampshire and Steen car, he drove Dick Goss's car when Yates was not available, he drove for Fat Jack Bynum. He would jump in just about anything, and he ended up crashing the Stokey car at Orange County pretty bad, and it mangled his arm, and it's still not 100%, but that ended his drag racing career. And we still see a lot of Jeep at the reunions and stuff like that, and I've even stopped off in Arbonne to visit with him, and he's one hell of a guy. Little bitty stump of a guy. The King of Garden Grove, this was the guys involved. Dave Beebe on this side, and the late John Mulligan. They operated out of the same cave down in, same garage down in Garden Grove that they called the Cave. And people like Fred Crow had his junior fueler in there, and Adams, and Mulligan and Beebe, and you name it. They had a good time down there. A lot of racing, a lot of bench racing, a lot of live being told, and it was that era of drag racing where it was still a great deal of fun rather than a lot of effort. The work was tremendous. I mean, it was a lot of work to make these cars run every week, and see to it, especially when you had a job. Gene worked at Hilburn. Dave Beebe worked at the Chevrolet house. I think Tim worked there as well. Mulligan was kind of a goof. He would, I think he hung around JNS Speed Center. He did like me. He didn't gotten too well to gainful employment. He kind of hung around. But they went fast. And unfortunately, Mulligan got burned at Indianapolis, and he didn't survive it. It was a terrible thing, and it took it all out of us at that point. But he was a good driver, no question about that. Next guy, not many people out here have heard of him. His name is Dave Chener. He drove the Shreve Automotive Don Long car. Dave started out with coupes and roadsters and what have you. Just as I was getting ready to leave New Orleans, he was active in driving those cars, and then Shreve bought the Don Long car, and they knew how to make motors run, and they did really good. They won, I think, the Spring Nationals one year. Did good at Indy. Made a lot of thunder. Ford Motor Company and the Ram Chargers. They were head-to-head competitors in what became the funny car. Started out as the altered wheelbase. Dan was the kind of the driving force behind the Ram Chargers. Next guy, Kenny Safford. Kenny Safford was one of the road kings. Started drag racing with a 57 Chevy, and raced with McEwen and Janke and all of those guys from the valley. He worked for the Chevrolet house in Glendale. And at one point, he and I were going to go into business before AMCO had a transmission franchise. He and I talked about getting a transmission shop because he was a really first-class transmission man. And I would run the shop and he'd do the mechanics and oh boy, trying to think of his name. He was putting together a franchise kind of a deal before AMCO. And something happened and he didn't get the franchise put together in our time frame, and so we kind of went separate ways. That would have altered my career significantly. I'm trying to think of the man's name. Just recently died. He was part of the Spaghetti Benders. He hung around with Bainey and all of those guys. Damn, why can't I think of his name? Anyway, Safford worked at that Chevrolet dealership and then went to work for, when he finally left the dealership, he went to work for Zuchel at Zuchel Racing Engines and worked there for several years and drove the B&M Torquemaster car, had his own Shark car. Was when he was still at the Chevrolet house, Safford, Gady, and Radican were a big factor in Top Fuel and Top Gas. When they ran gas when the fuel ban came on, but then when everybody started running fuel again back out here, they stepped up and ran nitro and ran really good and set the record at 195 back then.
And this was an Oldsmobile.
This is an Oldsmobile, 494-inch Olds, on a lot of nitro. Radican had run all the nitro, but the oil pump used to fall off of the motor, and when it did that, it wrecked everything. So, but that was a cast iron problem, not a faulty assembly problem. It was just the vibration would break the casting that was the oil pump. I think they eventually went to a billet oil pump, but it was at that point that Oldsmobile was now back there. Porter and Reese, Radican, Jackson, and Stearns, and Safford, Gady, and Radican still ran Olds, and there was an Olds in the east. Kreitz ran an Olds. Moody ran an Olds here on the West Coast on gasoline. Of course, Adams's Oldsmobiles were famous. But they were the last of the Oldsmobile. And then when Kenny worked for Zuchel, he started driving for Gotelli. And I would go with him to Fremont. So he'd have somebody to ride with him, and I'd sleep most of the way, and he would whine and complain that he says, I need somebody to go with me, and you sleep the whole way. What the hell's the future in that? So he drove for Gotelli, and then Zuchel sold his business to the Powerboat magazine people, and Buck Smith was in charge of that speed shop, and they made some good motors, and eventually Kenny got a ride in the Mr. Norm's Grand Spalding Dodge, and that's when he decided he wanted to be a full-time drag racer. So he picked up everything he had and moved to Chicago and started racing. He always wanted to be a famous racer. And him and Moravez and Prudhomme and Skip Torgerson and the rest of the Road Kings in the Burbank area, most of them got famous. Some of them didn't. And he wanted to be as famous as Prudhomme. He beat Prudhomme on several occasions with that Oldsmobile. So he was right in there in the hunt. But then he opened a machine shop back there and did very well, and is still active, and has repopped his car and runs it at the Cackle Fests. Gary Gabelich and his first wife, who was a Playboy bunny, The women fell all over Gabelich. It was amazing to watch him operate. He was definitely a daredevil. He'd do anything. He was driving for us, Sandoval, Madden, and I at Bakersfield, and we blew the clutch out of the thing about 100 yards out, and the clutch and the floater and stuff went in the stands, and the U-joint, we used U-joints instead of couplers, and the U-joint was hitting him on both ankles. I was down at the end because I wanted to see what the car looked like coming through. And I was the first one to him. He got the chute out, but the steering had been cut in half, and it kind of slowly drifted over it and stopped about 100 yards past the finish line. And I helped him out of the car, and he had to lay down because his ankles were so beat up from the U-joint that it didn't cut him, but it pounded him so where they were black and blue. And I laid him out on the ground, and he said, "Man, this thing really hooked up. Can we fix it?" My God, what is this guy made of? One night at Long Beach, he was driving Bill Martin's car, and the drag link from the steering arm to the front wheel went over it like this, so he had no steering. Didn't affect him. That would have terrified me, or just about anybody else. Didn't bother him a stitch. I think he ended up going 622 miles an hour. Didn't affect him. It was something else. I miss him. He was killed on a motorcycle accident, and all the dangerous things he did. First guy to drive a jet car. Didn't bite him, but the motorcycle bit him. Some guy pulled in front of him in a dump truck, and he couldn't avoid it. Here's a young man that drove for Tom here. Was very successful. This is Mike Sorokin. And he is standing behind Roland Leong's and Keith Black's Chrysler Marine Hemi. I knew Mike enough to talk to him, but we weren't close. I didn't get to know him very well. But he was a nice young man. He raced with the Surfers and with Roland. Was very successful, very good driver, and ended up getting killed in Tony Waters' car when, in the era of clutches, the clutch got him, blew it up, and he was going way too fast to survive an accident in just a roll cage, and it took him from us. Nice young man. His son currently is driving Nostalgia Top Fuel cars, Adam, and he's quite the shoe as well. We have some confusion in the drag racing business between the Larkins. This is what we call Dirty Tommy Larkin because he was always greasy. He raced top gas for a long time, was very, very successful with guys like George Bolthoff, and when Kenny was running gasoline and Adams was running gasoline, they had lots of good races down at Lions and what have you. And then he turned to Top Fuel, did good in Top Fuel. And I guess he's still around building motors for customers. I don't see him very often. I haven't seen him at any of the reunions, and I've been to like all 20 of them. But he was the other Tommy Larkin.